Promotional consideration paid for by the following. Yo Joe Outlet, your only source for G.I. Joe weapons and vehicle accessories. Don't have that incomplete Joe any longer. Connect with Yo Joe Outlet Center and complete that figure for an awesome price. Go check them out on eBay at Yo Joe Outlet Center and Facebook Yo Joe Outlet. Good quarantined afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Jason up of the New 80s Revolution back down here in the quarantine cave to continue on with the resurgence, the revisitation, if you will, of the greatest toy line in the history of toys. And I'm talking about none other, and I'm going to keep doing this, I'm talking about none other than the LJN Wrestling Superstar line up. We are breaking down Series 3 into probably 2 more parts because it's so deep. It's such a big line. And I don't want to do an hour-and-a-half video. You know, it tires people out. So we're going to probably break it down into 2 more parts and then jump into Series 4. Loving the comments. And I have fallen behind, and that was one thing I always, prided myself on with this channel was communicating with you guys regularly. So, always responding to comments and, just having feedback and some give and take communication. And I've stopped responding to comments. I've just been so backlogged with comments and work, and trust me, I'm backlogged in work too. But sitting here and so I gotta sit down and commit to responding to all of your comments because they're all great. But I do want you all to know that every single comment is read. And then, if something catches me right away, I'll respond real quick. But every comment pops up on my phone. So I see them all, I read them all, I appreciate them all more than you know. I just got to get in a better habit of going back and responding to them. So hopefully I'll get to do that soon. Man, what the heck else is going on? The LJN posters. I have had a little collection of the posters forever, for years. When I was buying figures back in the day, when I'd get them from eBay when I was restarting the collection, some auctions would include a poster, some, so I would just grab posters here and there, and I was basically just storing them. And then a while back I bought a bigger lot off of some Facebook group of maybe like 15 posters. So my poster collection has grown, the LJN posters. And I've decided to pull them. They were just sitting in a stack on one of my shelves. And they are just so beautiful and so iconic that they needed some display. They needed to be shown. But I have no wall space in this room to put posters up. So I put them on the ceiling. And I've put them on the end caps of some bookshelves that I'll show you. So, it's hard to look at them because they're on the ceiling, but I can kind of sit here and get my old pillow and lay back on the floor and stare up at the ceiling, and I can just see this awesome collection of LJN posters. So maybe I'll show you those eventually. But I got some here sitting on the floor that I haven't hung up yet, and take a look at these. I mean, again, you've heard me talk about through the LJNs Revisited, you've heard me talk about the iconic symbols of childhood. The Hulk Hogan figure, the Hulk Hogan LJN is an iconic symbol of childhood. For me, the LJN ring is iconic. The LJN packaging is iconic. This is iconic. Not necessarily the Iron Sheik. He's kind of iconic. But the poster was huge because, you think now, well, what's the big deal about a poster? But getting this free in the package was huge. And this was at a time when posters and pinups and decorating your walls as a kid was bigly important. That's right, bigly. Was huge, to hang something on your wall that represent. I mean, my kid loves doing that today. My kid's walls are covered with stuff. I mean, he puts stickers on the wall. He put everything on the wall. He just totally customizes his room, and I definitely did that as a kid, and these were a huge part of it. The artwork on these is outstanding, is tremendous. Again, iconic. I hate to keep using the same word, but anyway, some of them are older. I mean, this is Iron Sheik was one of the first 5 figures, so this is a very early LJN poster. I mean, as a kid, I would just sit and stare at this. I would look into the crowd and just look at all the faces. What are they doing? What's going on? This girl's cheering. This kid has his hands on his head. Oh my God, he can't believe what's happening. This kid's got a camera over here. He's taking great stuff. All right, so back into Series 3. We'll continue talking about the figures, talking about the memories, and we'll just keep it rolling. Keep it rolling, baby. Oh, yeah. Worst songwriter in history, Fred Durst. Worst lyricist of all time, Fred Durst. The worst. Fred Durst rhymes one word with the exact same word. That's bad. Terrible. Limp Bizkit. I don't know why I said that, but first figure of Series 3 Part 2 is, a face, a voice of childhood. And I talked about him as a voice of childhood when he died last year. But when Vince McMahon started to go national, they brought in this announcer, and he was such a perfect 80s wrestling whatever. Sorry, text came in. Such a perfect squirrely used car salesman character, announcer in a perfect era. This guy's character, because I do think Mean Gene was a bit of a character, kind of doing that radio Casey Kasem style voice. The facial expressions when he's interviewing wrestlers and they say something, troubling, his face sells it. This cheesy, cheeseball, Hollywood, over-the-top character, announcer gimmick has no place in wrestling today. Has no... I mean, you got Corey Graves doing the announcing thing, and that guy, he's worse than Limp Bizkit. But Mean Gene Okerlund, the face, the voice, always wearing the tuxedo, doing the backstage interviews, thinking of a question while I loved his reactions. I loved his sometimes inability to hold back his laughter at some of the stuff the guys were saying. I mean, there are some great blooper reels on YouTube. Mean Gene cracking up at different wrestlers cutting hilarious promos, and oh man, it's so great. But I used Mean Gene as an interviewer and as my ring announcer. So Mean Gene was my Howard Finkel. But it was Mean Gene. I never changed him. It was Mean Gene, and he would do my ring announcing, and he would do my my interviews, backstage interviews, and great figure. Very silly story. My old best pal as a kid Mean Gene actually had a match. Now in the WWF, Mean Gene actually had a match, teamed up with Hulk Hogan to take on George Steele and Mr. Fuji in some of the best comedy vignettes of all time. I think it was pretty much created on Tuesday Night Titans. The Mean Gene exercise segments, Hulk Hogan breaking into Mean Gene's house at 5 o'clock in the morning to drag him out to run, and Mean Gene is sitting there with a cigar and eating eggs, and it's just so good. It's so once in a lifetime television that we're not going to buy today. We're not buying into it today. And that's sad, but it's there. It exists. I have the footage. I can relive it. I'm going to relive it with you guys on Wrestling with the Past. But Mean Gene in an LJN moment, Mean Gene got into a little bit of a feud with Don Morocco at one point, and I don't remember the details, but I do remember Don Morocco beating up Mean Gene for some reason. But great figure, iconic. I'm going to say that a lot. Iconic symbol of childhood right here. The voice, the mannerisms, the figure. That's childhood, right there. Mean Gene, a must-have figure. Oh, which one next? I've identified this figure as one of my favorite LJN figures, most played with. And it's such a basic figure. There is nothing flashy about this. There's nothing special about it. But it captures this wrestler, especially at the era that he came in. When Ricky Steamboat first came to the WWF, he wore all black. He wore black, full-size, full-length trunks or tights. Tights. He, no ring jacket, no nothing. He was just Ricky the Dragon Steamboat coming in. In fact, he wore like these really cool. It was almost like a one-piece tights where it would cover his foot too. I'm sure he had some kind of wrestling shoes or even boots underneath the suit, but it would cover, so it was all one look. It was great. You couldn't tell that he had boots on. This is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, talent-wise, in-ring talent-wise, Ricky Steamboat, and I used the heck out of him as a kid. He was my world's champion at one point, multiple-time Intercontinental champion. I'm sure he had a run with the tag team titles at one point, but Ricky Steamboat held the WWF title in my federation at one point. Always a good guy, always just, I used the heck out of him. Even though he doesn't have the all-time best pose, didn't matter. I had some great matches with Steamboat. I remember I would always put Steamboat against Valentine for some reason. So my go-to match was always Steamboat and Valentine. And I could just have so much fun playing with those two figures. And again, very plain, very basic, but totally captures the dragon, Ricky Steamboat. And somebody that I think I teamed with Ricky Steamboat a few times. I remember teaming Ricky Steamboat with Jimmy Snuka. I remember teaming him with this guy. And this guy was very, 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 very often used in my federation as well. And was an Intercontinental champion, was a tag team champion, played a huge role in the WWF. And as I've mentioned before, one of my first few angles watching wrestling as a kid, the first few things I remember was the U.S. Express, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo, one of my favorite tag teams to this day, in the tag team title hunt, winning the titles. I remember Roddy Piper smashing Jimmy Snuka with a coconut on Piper's Pit, an angle that actually scared me as a kid. It was so intense. I remember having like legitimate anxiety watching that over and over again because they would replay it. I remember that being replayed so many times when it first happened, and it like freaked me out because it was the most real assault I'd ever seen at that point, and it scared me as a kid. And so, and another angle that I remember big as I entered the world of wrestling was Tito Santana versus Greg Valentine, the battle for the Intercontinental title. And so Tito Santana was a big part of my childhood because he was, like I said, he was one of my introductions to WWF wrestling, the Santana Valentine feud, which, again, go back if you can and watch some Greg Valentine Tito Santana matches. They are fantastic. They are 5-star matches, whatever that means. You know, the angle where Valentine injures Tito's leg and Tito's in the hospital and he's cutting an interview from the hospital and he's all drugged up. I remember he's all doped up and he's laying there in the hospital bed and he's saying, Greg Valentine, you broke my leg, but you didn't break my spirit, and I'll be back, Greg Valentine. I'm coming to get you, Greg Valentine. And then at the very end, he goes, Arriba. He musters up enough energy, Arriba, before he dozes off to the fentanyl haze that he was apparently put in. But cutting a promo from the hospital bed and giving out the old Arriba. One of my favorite moments. And even as a kid, I was like, "Oh my God, this is cheesy." But Tito Santana, ton of play in the Federation. Again, very plain figure. I don't like the color. I don't like the purple. Purple trunks, purple knee pads. I would have preferred white. Well, we did get white Tito, but I don't know, red maybe, anything but the purple. I don't like the purple. And, of course, we don't have the sombrero on the back of it, which I, as a kid, never knew that was a sombrero. You know what I thought it was? A UFO. Yeah. Go back and look at some pictures. I don't feel like editing in pictures. Go back and look at some pictures. Tito Santana's trunks, there's this little round thing on his trunks with like a little, I thought it was a UFO. For the longest time. It's a sombrero. I was a slow kid, what can I say? So here's Tito, used him a lot. Yeah. One of the silliest, again, since we've revisited the LJN, we've talked about the variant, crap that I never bought into. I mean, there's legitimate variants that I'm going to show you. And it's not even a variant. They're two different figures. I'm going to show you a variant, a real variant in a minute. But after, talking to myself, having a communication with an LJN employee, and then I missed the boat on interviewing him. And so he did a whole bunch of other interviews after he was on the Toys That Made Us. He ended up doing a little bit of a internet circuit, podcast circuit, whatever. And of course, I missed the boat. But he did offer me a free interview, and I don't know what happened. I didn't do it, and then he went and did it, and now it's old news. But, hearing it from this guy saying, "Look, guys, calm down with the variants. They're not intentional variants." But this figure has about 40 of them, and they're just so ridiculous. The Jesse the Body Ventura figure has probably 8 variants when it comes to a lighter shade of pink, a lighter shade of blonde in the hair. I mean, this one is almost orange. I don't know where this falls on the variant list. But again, they're just paint samples. They're just different. They're just different times of production, different product. I joked around last time that, Home Depot was sold out of the paint, so they went to Lowe's and they got a little bit of a different shade. Bear didn't have enough paint left, so they went with, I don't know, whatever, Acme Paint Company. That's it. That's what these variants are that people are going nuts over. But Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura was not a wrestler when this figure was released. He was well into retirement and well into broadcasting, being a commentator, along with Bruno Sammartino that I talked about last show. So I never used Jesse ever as Jesse Ventura. I did team him with Bruno at one point, and they were called Thunder and Lightning. Jesse was Lightning, and Bruno was Thunder. And they were just a tag team. They weren't Bruno Sammartino and Jesse Ventura. They were Thunder and Lightning. And they were kind of like a mid-card tag team for me. You know, they'd lose to the Bulldogs. They'd maybe win a match here and there, and they'd maybe challenge for the title, get beat. But Thunder and Lightning is how Jesse and Bruno got the most play in my federation. And so for that, I'm thankful for the Bruno and Jesse figures, because they got play, and they were part of my childhood, and they were part of my federation, just as different people. And you know, could we have benefited from a Jesse Ventura commentator figure? Sure, but you know, how much were they really gonna produce? I mean, was there a demand for a Bruno commentator and a Jesse commentator? I think we got all we were going to get with Mean Gene and Vince McMahon. Fine figure. Play pose is Jesse. I mean, it's Jesse's pose. He would always do this, fist out muscle pose. You know, he wouldn't do this. He would always do that. So that makes sense, right? And, you know, you made do with the play limitations, and this is Lightning. This isn't Jesse Ventura. This is Lightning of the famed tag team Thunder and Lightning. One of my favorite figures, one of my absolute favorite figures, maybe my favorite figure. And what a role this guy played in my federation. I must have seen the value in him as a kid before I knew deep roots of wrestling history, before I knew who he was, even pre-WWF. I didn't know Terry Funk was an NWA champion in 1985, in 1986. But I must have had a hunch, because I elevated this guy to the top of the World Wrestling Federation LJN rankings, all the way to the heavyweight title. Terry Funk was at one time an LJN WWF champion. What a great figure. I absolutely love this figure. This is the first time we get dual accessories, right? 2 accessories in a figure. We get the awesome branding iron, which was such a cool, and it even has the double cross logo, which is another thing that didn't hit me right away. You know, I knew he was from the Double Cross Ranch in Amarillo, Texas, but I didn't realize that this was a double cross. So he would brand his opponents, which was just such a cool gimmick. And they would sell the branding, even though there was no flame. He had carried the branding iron to the ring, and it had sat ringside for, several minutes. It must have cooled off. Did he heat it in the back room? Did he heat it in the dressing room and bring it out? Never any smoke coming off of the prone wrestler's skin, but an ash mark would be left behind. There would definitely be a mark, a branding. So Terry Funk would assault his opponent at the end of a match and brand him with the double cross man. And man, again, the wrestler would sell the heck out of it. They would sell it as if they were being burned to the skin, burned to the bone. And I loved it. I thought it was so great. And the second accessory is the hat, obviously. Great. And Terry Funk, I just love this figure. I can't say enough about it. Terry Funk was the champion. Terry Funk was a part of the best tag team I ever created. For some reason, well, I know the reason, they're both cowboys, but I put him with Cowboy Bob Orton very early, and they were the Wild Desperados. You've heard me tell that story before. And they were managed by Mr. Fuji, and they dominated the tag team world in the LJN Federation. The Bulldogs couldn't stand up to them. Nobody could challenge Terry Funk and Cowboy Bob Orton. They were multiple-time tag team champions. They were the best tag team I had. And one of my proudest creations, the Wild Desperados, that came only from my head. Thunder and Lightning, Ventura and Bruno. I think there was a Thunder and Lightning tag team that I read about in the deep indie world of the 80s and in the back pages of the magazines. I think I read about Thunder and Lightning, so I stole that, obviously, but I didn't steal Wild Desperados. That was all me. That was all 9, 10-year-old me. Terry Funk, one of the greatest LJN figures ever made. One of my favorites, 100% one of my favorites. Finally, a true variant. And a strange variant. Strange, I guess, that this guy got a figure. Even more strange that he got two. And I have not heard in the interview, I'm just having a little punching match between these two guys. I have not heard in the interview with the LJN employee why they did this. Why did they pick such a I don't know, non-superstar in the first place, and why did they give him two different outfits in the second place? This certainly isn't a mistake. This isn't a paint sample error, but there is something interesting about this figure that I've noticed before, but I'm noticing again. Anyway, I'm talking about the dual SD Jones. Now, not only does he get a figure, not only does he get two, but he gets one of the best LJN figures ever. Not for the character, but for the pose. I mean, look at this. This is a perfect wrestling figure. Perfect. You've got a hand, you've got a fist in punching position. His legs are spread out, bulky, perfect figure. This is a perfect play pose figure. If every LJN figure was made this way, I'd have been happy. So SD Jones gets the perfect LJN figure, and he gets two. Hawaiian shirt LJN SD Jones versus red shirt LJN SD Jones. And what I've noticed is that the headbands are the same. So I don't know. What's the deal? Did this eventually become too expensive to make? And so they just painted over it red, but kept the headband? I mean, why not give them a red headband if you're going to go that? So I'm thinking that, maybe this one was like, all right, guys, let's move on here. Let's dump these remaining figures. I don't know. I don't know which one came first. I don't know if they were both released at the same time. No idea what is the deal with the SD Jones figure. If any of you guys know, let me know. But had I interviewed, I can't even remember his name. It's Bill something. Bill Stanhope. Had I interviewed him, I would have asked. Probably would have been the first question I asked. What's the deal with SD Jones? So you've heard several times that SD Jones was part of a faction in my federation. Because you don't have jobber matches in your LJN federation because you really only have one enhancement guy. I guess you could turn, I don't know, who could you turn into enhancement? Corporal Kirshner, maybe. True. But this is the only real true enhancement worker. The only true jobber, if you will, was SD Jones, right? We didn't get a Salvatore Bellomo. We didn't get a Jose Luis Rivera. We got an SD Jones. No Mario Mancini's. I'm starting to morph into Jesse Ventura here. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, so I used him as part of a trio, a six-man tag, a dominating six-man tag. SD Jones, who was renamed Brickhouse Brown. Cannot take credit for that, obviously. There was a Brickhouse Brown in World Class Championship Wrestling around the same time, and I stole the name. Just stole it. Brickhouse Brown would team up with Mike Rotundo, who, if you watched the last episode, was Don Morocco, and they teamed up with Corporal Kirshner to form this no-name trio who dominated my LJN federation. So SD Jones got probably way more playtime in my federation than anybody else's in the world. And the crazy part is when I would do the trio, I would only use red shirt SD. I wouldn't use Hawaiian shirt SD because if you're wearing a Hawaiian shirt, you're a good guy. You can't wear a Hawaiian shirt and be a bad guy. So it was the dastardly SD Jones, Brickhouse Brown with the red shirt. So, there's some interesting insight from me. The SD Jones figure is the best LJN figure. Play-wise. It's the best figure. Play pose. That's part 2 of Series 3. We're rolling along. We're rolling through it. And you guys are watching, so that's pretty good. Keep it coming. We'll do another one soon. I'm going to be watching another episode of Championship Wrestling tonight and doing a Wrestling with the Past, which hopefully will be up by Wednesday. So that's coming. We're almost at the end of 1983 with Wrestling with the Past, which means we're almost at our first house show. Oh, I'm sorry, we're almost at the end of January 1983. And we're coming up to our first house show of Wrestling with the Past, which will be fun to look at. What else? That's it. That is it. That is all. We'll see you all next time. Until then, good night now.